It's on there. Saying that HDMI is not.
Oh, there it goes.
Okay. Are we good? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here on your Sunday afternoon. I really appreciate it. There's a lot of information to cover here, so I want us to get started. A couple of things for how I think we should best run today. We're going to be breaking down the infographic that you have. There will be a lot of information. We will go through it piece by piece. If you have a clarifying question in a section that you're confused about, I'd like to answer those in that moment so that we're all on the same page moving through this information. If we have more broad questions, or if I know we're going to answer your question later on in the presentation, I may ask you to wait and we'll revisit that, just so we can make it through everything and kind of not lose the thread here. So part of this is what I would consider kind of the second part of my June resolution, proposing a option A, B, or C for how the association continues with handling the clubhouse. And one reason why this has taken how long it has is just what I would say, my re-education of how we can do things. So on our next slide, this is kind of where I started out 6 months ago. And with the nature of my life right now, I have really my only time to think through anything deeply is when I wash my hair. I have 3 small children, and usually it's mom, 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 and I can't really process much. So about twice a week, I get to take a deeper dive into bigger issues and kind of wrap my head around what's going on. So it's taken a while to go from a napkin drawing into what we're going to walk through today. But I also want to recognize I'm probably not the only person that was operating kind of in this outer sphere of misconceptions. You know, can we build what we want on our site? Probably not necessarily. Can reserves be approved in lump sums? You know, let's remodel a building, use reserves, let's approve that. Not quite, not exactly how things work. Can we be upgrading reserve items with strictly reserves? That depends too. There's some best practices and not so best practices. And can we be locking in future boards with current board decisions? Again, not necessarily. There's best practices to how to do a lot of this. So this is where I was probably last year, both as a member being somewhat informed, as a new member to the board as well. And in learning all of this more deeply, we're going to go from this outer area, drilling into best practices. So the point of the resolution in June, wanting to offer members an option A, B, or C in how we proceed, is making sure that we are in alignment with our membership. It's really hard to be on a board pushing a boulder uphill when you are in opposition to what your membership wants. What I will say too, for anyone This will be shared with the membership, the presentation, the PowerPoint will be shared. You'll have access to all of this following. The infographic will be emailed out as well, and also the recording of today's presentation. We will all be sharing all parts of it. So the objective is for the board to align with our membership through essentially a directional advisory vote. And we'll go into a little more of that later. We want to make sure that we are investing in assessments wisely and, again, in alignment with what the majority would like us to be doing. What we want to understand, though, is that there is a purview that the board has to be making improvements via special assessments up to a certain threshold. The board has the authority to do so within a 5% cap of our annual budgeted gross expenses. And for our budget, specifically for PMC, that's around $350,000 a year that the association could special assess for something that does not require a member vote. This vote, advisory vote, it's not essential, it's not binding, but it is essential. There's a lot right now that needs to be decided with the clubhouse. We don't want it to be kind of at the whim of whatever the makeup of the board is. The objective here is to make sure that the members' voices are heard, and that then becomes the cornerstone of what the association is guiding themselves with. What the board is guiding themselves against is, where do our members stand? Let's check ourselves back to that position at every decision. Okay, next one. Big part of this, and this is somewhat of my background as well as a producer and production manager, I want to know what the budget is, what the scope is, what the timeline is, what are the rules that we are working within. We can't do our job well if we don't know those parameters. And it's not beneficial to the membership as well to not understand those parameters, because then you can't hold the boards accountable to what we're doing. Both sides need to be very, very clear on what the rules are, both from a governance position with Davis Sterling and California Corporations Code and Civil Code, and both from a county position, what's building code requirements, what are earthquake requirements, all of that. That plays into both of these pieces. Okay. So this is just an overview of what we're going to be covering today. We want to understand what are the financial considerations, reserve use and restrictions, what falls under board's purview, what requires a member vote. And then from a kind of physical and county consideration, what are our existing building allowances, new code requirements, and scope and budget limitations. So hopefully everyone in the audience has this infographic. We're going to piece this apart and go through it step by step so that we understand all the pieces. So starting in our financial parameters, let's look at reserves. A reserve item is any asset the association is responsible for maintaining, repairing, or replacing over time, and it has a predictable remaining useful life and replacement costs. Replacements can include efficiency upgrades and new technology, but must remain like for like in scale and function. A key component here is that boards approve the replacement of each reserve item individually, no blanket approvals. These come to the board via resolution. The specific item, what was allocated in reserves, has it reached the end of its useful life, what are we replacing it with? And is it comparable? Is it still within our pricing? All these factors are considered piece by piece, no blanket overall approval. Oh, sorry. Make sure I didn't miss anything here. What I want to call out specifically for our association, of the things that we have between the clubhouse and the pavilion right now that have reached the end of their remaining useful life, it's around 1.9 million in reserve money is ready to replace those things. Okay. Specific to PMC, our threshold for being a reserve item is $5,000 or greater. Part of this is we don't want to be micromanaging the association and the office operations. There are some things that will have a longer useful life than a year, but their dollar amount might be a couple $1,000s, a couple $100s. A key piece with reserves is that that spend has to be approved by the board. So if we're having to approve every single little item under $5,000, we're just delaying the operations ability to do their job and do it well. So for PMC specifically, the threshold is $5,000. The useful life is over 1 year to 30 years. Another key element is that these are bigger items that are not included in the kind of annual just operating consumption of the association. So equipment that will eventually need replacing, that's considered in this item. If you're going to, wear and tear, maintenance things that you're handling throughout the year, that's an operating item. So there's a difference there in what's in operating, what's in reserves. And then capital improvements are not included. These are substantial discretionary additions, upgrades to the association's common area, components, or materials. Now looking at special assessments. This is an amount that is still within the board's purview. And this would be for areas that are, again, not covered in reserves. Once you start getting into moving walls, changing your footprint, adding new amenities, that is not a reserve item. Yes. It's somewhat up to our discretion. There is an initial kind of time frame given, what's the useful life of a vehicle? Let's say 15 years. As we're getting close to that expiration, though, there is an annual review of, okay, is this vehicle actually on its last legs? So there's a little wiggle room there of, do we replace something in its actual end of life, 15 years? Do we extend it a year? Has it had more wear and tear and now it's 14 years, needs to be replaced? So that's the remaining useful life, of course. So within special assessments, the board has the ability to special assess up to a certain amount, and that is our 5% of the annual budgeted gross expenses. Again, for PMC specifically, and our gross budget of $7 million, it's roughly $350,000. What that means is that within the population of PMC, the price per lot, the most that you can be assessed each year without a member vote is $120. And that is a combination of any number of projects. That could be one giant project that's $350, and now we have to special, that's your amount at the end of the year is a one-time, one item, $120. It could be a bunch of smaller items, but it can't exceed the $350. So we could have 15 bocce ball courts added. They're not in reserves. They're a new item. They're going to have a longer useful life than 1 year. Here are all of these pieces. Your tally for the year, again, with all of those combined, cannot exceed $120. Yes. Do you have the copy here? The graphic, the copy you have also has the graphic is what's actually on the printout. It's just showing one wedge at a time. It's a quote, sorry. It's quoting civil code. Oh yeah, can we kill just this end? Is that too much? I'm happy to read the civil code. We can do that too. Specifically for special assessments, and this is referencing Civil Code 5605B, the important part of this code is underlined. Notwithstanding more restricted limitations placed on the board by the governing documents, The board may not impose a regular assessment that is more than 20% greater than the regular assessment for the association's preceding fiscal year, or impose special assessments which in the aggregate exceed 5% of the budgeted gross expenses of the association for that fiscal year without the approval of a majority of a quorum of members. So let's talk on the next slide, the vote threshold. So basically, the board has the ability to, within their purview and the governance that they're operating within, special assess for items that are not reserve items. So for example, if we wanted to buy another vehicle, we have our current vehicles in reserves, they're accounted for. If we wanted to add a new vehicle, that's not in reserves. You can't use reserve money for that. It's not an operating cost. That is an asset. That is a capital improvement. That will be a small special assessment. The amount of the vehicle, say it's a $50,000 truck, that is under the 5% annual budgeted gross cap that the board can work within. Our budget allows for up to $350,000 to be special assessed per year. So $50,000 falls significantly under and within that cap. Yes, so meaning 350 total per year. So I could do I could do 7 trucks, or I could do, say, 1 building for 350, but the board cannot exceed that $350,000 in total items per year without then triggering a member vote. If we wanted to do 8 trucks, well, 7 the board has the ability to purchase within their purview. An 8th truck, though, that year would mean the membership has to then approve that spend because it exceeds the cap. Yes. Correct. Yes. 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 Yes, for sure. Send it to me after. And if there's additional information we can add to this, yes. It's in my book too, yes. Yes. And let's go to the next slide because this is very important. I was thinking the one after this, but this is also relevant too. We're going to in the next piece. We're going to talk capital improvements and what that means. Just to expand a little bit on what would fall under a 5% cap that the board would be considering that are, useful or relevant things. If the board wants to be rearranging in specifically the conversation of how we handle our clubhouse, there are funds allotted to every specific component, but you're not going to be, walls are not considered reserve items. You're not usually replacing walls every 30 years. And those are not normally moving every 30 years unless you're changing the space. So that would be something within the board's purview. Okay, we want to maximize our office space that we have, put 1 or 2 walls in. Those would not be reserve items. They would need to be special assessment items. They might be very small, but they're still not appropriate use of our reserve funds. Correct. Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, one example, it would be, okay, does the board want to, add some kind of water park element to the pond? That could maybe be a little different because there's been member input weighing in on wanting that for a number of years. But something like that would need to have, there needs to be member input. The guiding piece there, we don't want a board just operating in a vacuum. We want member input. That's why, again, every piece, whether it's a capital improvement or a replacement of a reserve item, is approved in open session and done piece by piece. So it's not a blanket approval where you're not scrutinizing every piece of it. That's, again, like every piece of this has a checkpoint that it needs to go through. And sure, there might be a scenario where you have, 5 or 6 directors who really want something. They're going to have to present that to the members and be accountable to the members in that. And hopefully, if it's not in alignment with the association, they're not even suggesting it. And they're getting enough pushback to say, you know what, this is not the right thing.
If you have a question, raise your hand and we'll give you the microphone for the live audience.
Let's just so we're all on the same page, our mission statement. The PMCPOA will provide high-quality services to its members and continually improve its organizational operations and capital assets while maintaining fiscal responsibility. It will protect the intimacy and mutual respect of the community's small village atmosphere and practice sound stewardship in conserving the surrounding natural and environmental resources. It's on our website too. Again, we're looking at things that can be added. Sorry, I want to stay on topic here so we can stay within our time frame as well. Again, practical upgrades within the board's discretion. Again, there's a bandwidth within their job to operate things efficiently and well and make sure the association is taken care of. This is encompassed within that 5% cap. Pieces that would also be considered could be new amenities that are small items that, again, fall under the $350,000. What I want to point out as well is this is not $350 per like the clubhouse and all these little items within that adding to $350. This is $350 encompassing the entire association and everything that we look at. So there may be a situation where, okay, we're looking at putting, say $300,000 towards the clubhouse, but we also have other areas that might need something as well. Maybe we didn't already have a bathroom in the park. We want to put in a bathroom that year. Across the street of the park, that still factors into the total $350. It's not just this building, it's the entire bucket of what PMC takes care of. So even in our conversations of looking at, okay, what can we do each year with the clubhouse? We still have to almost keep a buffer there in mind for, okay, if we needed to put something in, that would be a special assessment. We don't want to be running the full amount just in the clubhouse. We're going to need a little wiggle room to be able to take care of other things across the association. Let's talk capital improvements for a second here. So this is the tipping point. If we get to a place where, whether it be a single project or an accumulation of projects in one year, if we exceed $350,000, anything above that has to be approved by a majority of a quorum. And where that matters here as well is that both in Davis Sterling, this particular quorum for capital improvements is a specific percentage. It's 50%. Just some context. in our governing documents, a quorum for our annual elections to approve bylaws and vote in new directors is 25%. That is different from the quorum for capital improvements. Different threshold, different participation level that is needed in order to proceed with something. So for capital improvements specifically, if we exceed $350,000, we have to have 50% of our membership participate in the official vote. So we need 1,452 members to participate on that ballot. You can't have less. Otherwise, the vote is invalid. You didn't have a quorum. So it's a twofold threshold. You first have to hit a quorum to even consider the outcome vote. And then within that quorum, you need a majority vote to approve that spend over $5,000. So we would need specifically 727 memberships to approve a capital spend over our $5,000. That's a very important threshold. And unfortunately, probably one that is highly unlikely to be attained just looking at our prior voting turnout the last handful, dozen of years. Last year specifically, we were in probably the 870-ish range for total participants in the election. So that didn't even hit our 50% quorum, let alone having enough votes to approve a capital spend. Okay. Let's talk the steps that you would take for doing a large project that would require member vote and a budget over 350. You would go through a discovery and desirability phase. Major changes or expansions begin with community input. Limited spending justified for cost estimates, but broader work requires approval. Then a preliminary approval. Before investing in construction drawings or contractor bids, we secure member support for the project direction. That would basically be where we're at right now across the board. What direction does the membership want us to pursue? Third, financing and formal vote. Projects outside of reserves and exceeding the aggregate of $350,000 require membership vote. Again, a majority of a quorum. Special assessments and loans both need approval per Civil Code 5605B. Then a final full disclosure. Members receive complete financial impact analysis, loan terms, and repayment schedules via secret ballot procedures. This is, again, not really attainable based on just our member vote turnout, which is unfortunate. So this is kind of a recap of the financial parameters that we are working in. Reserve items are approved and replaced individually, not in a lump sum, big project format. Non-reserve items can be special assessed and combined with a total of up to $350,000. That's within the board's purview. Total upgrades over 350 require member vote and approval. So the first half of this wedge, approving reserve item replacements and special assessments up to 350 annually, are within the board's purview to do. Tipping that 350 mark, now we need a majority of a quorum to approve that direction. Okay. Let's now talk specifically for the clubhouse objective here, because the reserves cover really anything within reserves, whether it's clubhouse or not. Let's talk parameters from the county, because this will also impact how we can proceed going forward. We want to understand what the existing building allowances are, new code requirements, and scope and budget limitations. So staying within our existing building footprint is kind of what we have to do unless we want to consider much more restrictive requirements by the county. We are essentially grandfathered into any infrastructure earthquake requirements if we stay within our current footprint for the pavilion and for the clubhouse building itself. And in the last 6 months, we've reconfirmed with the county, can we bump out to the sidewalk in the front? Can we give our office space a little more? Nope, we cannot exceed the existing footprint. Otherwise, we trigger a much larger scope and parameter for the clubhouse. Within that, there is also a building regulations code that specifies that you can't exceed 60% of your replacement value of your building without, again, tipping into bigger code, new code requirements. Our budget right now, kind of current value of our facility, clubhouse and pavilion, is around $5 to $6 million. So 60% of that is roughly 3 to 3.6 million is where we need to land budget-wise to kind of stay within our grandfathered parameters. Okay, next one. On the extensive side, the key piece of this is within code 17.04.030A within the Kern County Code of Building Regulations. And the key piece of this code is if the cost of any repairs, remodeling, or reconstruction thereof, as estimated by the building official, would exceed 60% of the replacement cost of a new structure or similar size and kind, all work shall be in accordance with the applicable requirements of new construction. So I want to specify here, we're not recommending or saying that we would do anything not to code within our current building. What this does mean, though, is that if we exceed and kind of void our grandfathered position, the key element of the new code that makes things very, very difficult is the seismic requirements and our proximity to our fault lines. That is what really takes this from something manageable within our reserve budget and within the purview of the board's spending to actually take care of our facilities into something that is probably vastly outside our ability to accomplish. Part of that is that we would need to do extensive soil sampling of our property here. And new requirements have new parameters of how close you can be to fault lines, how far down you have to test, and that's a significant amount of money to go that route. We went part of the way there in looking at what could be done where the old pool was, and partially kind of in the island wood chip area, but we did not take the surveying down deep enough to get a definitive position of what can we build, what can we not build. So we have still not fully answered that question, and we're not ready to spend that kind of money unless there is the member support pursuing that direction. But again, everything done within the walls of the building will be to code. Structurally, though, if we stay within the footprint, we don't need to be restricted to the new seismic parameters that are going on now in California. Okay, let's go to the next one. So just a little recap of kind of by the numbers, what this would look like. Our current estimated value of our clubhouse and pavilion, about 5 to 6 million. 60% replacement value of that is 3 to 3.6 million. We have roughly 1.9 million in reserves for clubhouse and pavilion items that are ready to be replaced, that have reached the end of their useful life. Then there is the ability for a special assessment per year. Again, that's a maximum of 350,000 and change here. If a clubhouse project took 3 to 4 years, the max special assessment is 1.4 million. Add that to the 1.9 million already in reserves, and the total project scope is around 3.3 million, which lands kind of right in our window of what we are allowed to spend without triggering now the county coming back and saying, you have to meet all these seismic requirements. The total special assessments, again, we cannot assess over $120 per year. If you ever get a bill for that, that is a special assessment that you did not vote on, I would really hope that you would make a lot of noise. That's not allowed. 120 is the max, unless the membership has voted in approval for it in a proper election, full quorum and majority. So probably a max of $450 in what could be spent. And I say that really based on what we could even do within the building, what's being considered done in the building at various levels. Looking at that list, I don't think we would come close to even maxing out the $350 per year. But again, this is the absolute max that the association can spend without a member approval. And that's very, very important to understand, both on the membership side and the board side. Members need to be fully aware of how the board can and should be operating. And if they are not operating in that way, know so to be able to say something. Yes, Cam. Can we use the microphone? Just because it fits into the recording for online.
I wanted to point out that the board can approve up to a 20% increase in the regular assessment per year based on the current 20% of the current assessment, which would be up, like right now, approximately $500 per lot.
Yes.
And that would be 1.5 million. So that's another way to, I mean, maybe you could explain, I mean, people
Yes, let's talk about
wouldn't
it.
like it, but that's
about it.
possible, and that doesn't need a vote. And the other thing too is that 350 per year was based on the current budgeted expenses, which would go up a little each year. So if it's more than 120, then it's normal that you could do it without a vote, and it would be a
Correct.
little more than 120 per lot.
Yes, that'll have a little fluctuation because again, it's based on a current budget. Speaking to the 20% of your annual assessment, yes, the board has the ability to do that, but the budget for the annual assessment is the operating budget of the association. That is the annual consumption of what it takes to run the operation. That really is not how you want to be tackling capital improvements, because that is not something that's going to be kind of like a one-year thing, essentially. Where I would say a good example of a increase maybe in the assessment, and this we'll touch on a little bit actually too. Let's talk the bear ambassador position. This is a great current example that we're dealing with. The recommendation from the committee right now is that it be a paid position. Okay, well, that our initial suggestion to them was put it on an A2 and we'll put it through the review process and consider it in the budget. That actually is probably how things should be working for an item like that, where it's a payroll and benefits. That's a annual consumption, not an asset that the building now has. It's not a pickleball court, it's not a bocce ball court, it's not an equestrian hillside or anything. It's an operating expense. It consumes and expires each year, and you replace it the next year. And if you terminated the position, it's done. It's not an asset that the association has. So our A2 process is probably a little backwards as well in all of this, because we've been thinking about it as, what do you want to maybe add to the association? Whether it's, again, a pickleball court, well, that's an asset. That's a capital improvement. That should technically be a special assessment. And if it's under the 350, the board can decide, yes, we have huge member support for this. We want to include it. It's going to be, say, $100,000 to do. Okay, that budget that year, you would get your annual assessment invoice for your standard annual assessment. And then there would be a line item for your portion of the pickleball court. $100,000 divided by 2,900. I don't know what the math is on that. It's small. It's not a lot. Versus how we've done things in the past, where in A2, say the bocce ball court, that was put into the annual budget and purchased that way versus as a special assessment. So we're starting to see, and I'm starting to learn as well, like, okay, how do we do this all in some best practice model versus how we've been doing it? Because it has not really been as transparent as it should be, or as kind of clear cut as it should be. And that allows for weird gray area, and it just kind of muddies the whole process. So the objective here is to look at what are our best practices, and can we align ourselves with that and make sure that we are really running things strictly so that members understand it, the board understands it, and we're all on the same page, and there isn't this kind of weird gray area that we're operating our finances in. Yes, Nicole. Use the microphone, please.
Just for clarification for those in the audience and listening, I want to reiterate that what you're saying is assessment increases are intended only when there's an increase in operating expenses, and they are simply not intended to cover things like capital additions.
Correct. Yes.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Let's do the next slide. Okay, so just kind of a recap of what I've been learning and correcting in my misconceptions the last few months, and what I'm sure others have been thinking too, because again, I consider myself an averagely informed member and a relatively new board member. I'm sure I'm not the only person who maybe had some misconceptions of how things should be done. So for one, we cannot tie the hands of future boards. There's no mass approval for large projects. Each piece has to be approved solely, individually, unless you have exceeded that 5% threshold and you are doing a much larger mass approval, because a project of that size is going to likely be contracting a contractor to do it. And that then is a one item. But again, you've exceeded the threshold of your spending, requires member vote. Reserve funds used for reserved items only. The board can special assess up to 5% of budgeted gross expenses. Any item tipping the scale over the 5% requires member vote. We must stay within building footprints or trigger new code requirements. We must stay under 60% replacement value or also trigger new code requirements. So let's dig in a little bit to the infographic that you have and the options that we have going forward. And here is where I need to also correct my resolution that I had proposed in June. Because again, my observation of how reserves had been used in the past, both as a member and now being on the board, was thinking you could actually take care of things with just reserves only. That takes away a key element of the board's ability to do their job well. One example of that, again, walls are not in reserves. You're not usually moving walls every 30 years. We have actually ample space in the facilities that we have. We're not using the space well between our storage rooms, our offices, layouts of offices. It can be done much better. So part of that is in reserves. Carpet, windows, paint. What's not in reserves, where we wouldn't want to hamstring the board's ability to do their job, is do we want to move some walls, put some walls in, move some offices around? The board can do that and greatly benefit the association in various areas, not just offices and moving walls. We don't want to hamstring the board's ability to do that. And so saying that there is a reserves only option is not actually best practice. So what I would consider option A is one where everything is anchored around reserve items. And then are there ways to improve operations and functionality and our building layout and space with a very minimal special assessment? Even within the board's purview here, from zero special assessment to maxing out each year, that's $350,000. That's a significant spread. I don't want to discount what $10 per year versus what $120 per year means for members. I don't really want to be the one saying, or anyone on the board to say, we're going to max this out. We would like member input. Is there a desire for improvements in things and taking advantage of what we can do within our limited scope, and people have the budget for $120 per year? Or is the sentiment, you know what? No, it's really hard to meet our needs. We're a single family or a single income family, or I'm retired, I'm on a fixed income, I'm really stretched as it is. Please make do with what exists in reserves and be very, very diligent about anything that goes over that. That is a spread that I personally believe is very worthwhile getting feedback from the membership on. I think any board needs that guiding cornerstone, that North Star. Where do we land as we are assessing each of these items and taking an item and replacing it with reserves, looking at, okay, is it its best use? What are we anchoring ourselves to? What improvements can we make? Or we got to stay really, really frugal. That's really the ask here. So we can't do a full reserves only option A. It locks the board's ability to do their job well. Let's look at B. We touched on this some already. Outside of, say, expanding a reserve item that already exists, and let's use the roof for example. So reserve items, they're calculated a couple different ways. One, the overall replacement cost, $5,000 or more, lifespan up to 30 years. It also factors in the size, the footprint of it. So for building things specifically, we can talk vehicles another time. So for example, our roof right now currently has a certain square footage that's covered in reserves. There's conversations about, do we extend the roof along the balcony side overlooking the clubhouse, both to offer a canopy overhang and to mitigate the wear and tear on our building and on our windows and our facility. That extended portion is not technically in reserves. You can get into some gray area like that of, well, but we can do the whole thing for the same price as the normal roof. That gets into a very dangerous gray area using your reserves. Where do you use that policy or not? And whose discretion is that? And you're essentially borrowing from yourself down the line. Because even though there is a lump sum of money in reserves, it is accounted for each item. So sure, you could say, okay, this 5% increase of the roof line, well, it's a reserve item, we're going to cover it all in reserves. That 5% though is now borrowing from another reserve item down the line. So it's not really best practice. So this is one example where a special assessment could be used to upgrade a reserve item that already exists, but your scope is different than what was accounted for in reserves. You could also factor in added items. If we wanted to look into a gym facility downstairs, we have no gym right now. There's no reserves for that, obviously. That would be a special assessment item. If we wanted to change out the flooring in the pavilion to something that would work for the dance fitness classes, again, the floor in there is not meant for that. So new floor, new purpose, special assessment. It's a new item. This would be, again, the maximum that a board could do within their purview that does not trigger a member vote. Very specific cap there. Let's look at option C. So this again, like we've been hammering home, very likely exceeding the $350,000 spend per year if you're going to do any extensive remodel. That requires a member vote. The key element to this that is the expensive unknown right now in a scenario like this is that we don't have the concrete information to know what we can build on our site based on current seismic restrictions. We have not gone down deep enough to get that final determination. If we wanted to do that, it's probably another $100,000 to finish that surveying. To know what? To know, yes, you can build in your current spot and expand your footprint, or to learn, no, you cannot build there. Your fault line proximity is too close to new codes. Find somewhere else to build. So again, option C, it's available, but it's a very high threshold to move forward in that scenario because it does require member approval. So again, just to recap, we're asking in the coming weeks, this will be a directional advisory vote. It's not binding because the board does have the purview to spend up to $350 per year, but it's an important cornerstone to how the board and future boards proceed. There is a spread here that exists, and it's important that the board have member feedback to anchor themselves back to. And one practical way that you would see this is, referencing in resolutions. For example, okay, board resolves to add a small, facility gym based on member vote and sentiment from the December 2025 advisory vote. So it's not, the decisions going forward are not just based on any director's position, it's what has our membership voiced and where do they want us to land in the scope of what the board can do within its purview. Yes. We use the microphone.
Do these improvements or changes or whatever apply to the post office building? I'll try again. Do these apply to that post office building I think that we've got now?
Sort of. It would apply in the sense that if we wanted to make any upgrades on that building that are not in reserves, that amount would be part of the overall $350 per year. So again, it's not like $350 per post office and per clubhouse and per pavilion. It's the whole association as a total has that cap. Of course. Let's go to our last one. I think that might be the end. Oh, just to run through our next steps. So this presentation, the infographic that you have, the recording of today, will be included in all of our communication going out with our advisory vote. What you will need, yes, question in the back.
Hi, my name is Izumi, and I'm just wondering if you guys have ever considered or explored looking for any kind of grants or public funding available, because this is a very special, unique location that we have this community in, and with the fact that we are on the seismic zone and fire zone, there are a number of public incentives available. I just wanted to know if you guys are exploring that.
I don't believe we have so far. Our grant effort has really been on the wildfire and kind of brush mitigation in our green belts. So if you have any information, I would love if you would send that to the board, and our email will be on the next slide. Our new GM. Oh, great, to Bob. Awesome. Wonderful. So just to recap what you will be seeing in our advisory survey, you will be asked to enter your member ID, and then to keep things as anonymous as possible, your first and last initial with that. If you're, and this is the first or last initial of that person who is on title, primary person on title. So not my initials, my husband's initials. If your property is a trust or an LLC, it's the first two initials of that name. We're making sure that we have kind of all scenarios encompassed in that, but we want to make sure that there is a level of anonymity here from our last member survey process, and an ability to also verify that this is the appropriate member track number. It's a survey link for our advisory vote. Yeah, it's okay. It's one question, would you like A, B, or C? And there's distinctions and explanations for each option. We will open this up after these presentations as we get all the materials compiled and run this through December 12th. So the planning committee can vet and check for any duplicates and things to be able to then announce the majority decision at our December 20th open board meeting. Yes, Christy.
It would be a little bit hard to make this decision without knowing what our next year's assessment would be. We have a excellent GM who's lowering our costs considerably. We're under budget right now. I'm wondering if lower assessments, yearly assessments, could like balance out a special assessment.
Mathematically, yes. Both in the max that can be assessed per year, obviously, because our budget would be lower, therefore our 5% would be lower.
No, I'm saying could like the 1,900 or so that we're paying, if that were lowered by $100 because of our cost savings this year, and then we assess a special assessment for $100. You know, it's a wash basically.
Exactly.
And we're
Yeah.
getting to use those funds legally to make improvements.
Exactly, yes. And
So what is, I mean, we don't know where we're going to land at the end of the year, but, you know, did the board consider that? We're going to be doing zero-based budgeting and
it doesn't really change kind of the rules that we need to operate within.
right, but our expenses don't need to keep increasing. We need to be looking at
Yeah.
cutting costs.
And there's been significant cleanup in how we do things, what we're buying, what the rate is we're buying it at. Are we using everything efficiently? There is so much there that is being looked at on the operations side for sure, and the budget committee side as well. Absolutely.
And even with the bear ambassador position, you know, working for a municipality, I know that adding positions is significantly more expensive than contracting out for a year or two
Exactly.
to get that knowledge and document it and train in-house people. And
Yes.
so I'm wondering if you're looking at that.
There's definitely an element of looking at contracted freelance versus staff positions, just in a general quick budget education here. That's definitely being considered and on the table for a number of positions. It's not, again, that's our GM's purview. Where it affects this is kind of twofold. It would affect the actual 5% cap, the actual number, because the overall budget would be coming down. So 5% of that is obviously going to be less than 5% of our current budget. So there's a annual cap that would be less, which again is why we can't be doing a blanket approval for something. It's going to need to be kind of piece by piece, phase by phase to make sure, okay, what are our next two steps? Are we doing the roof and the exterior next? What is that price tag? Does that stay within our annual cap and our current annual cap? Each piece has to be kind of cross-checked against all of these parameters.
I'm just wondering at the timing of the vote, because I think the members would have a better picture of where the direction that they want to go in once we have the budget in March.
For sure, I get that, definitely. The timing of the vote is a little bit from all directions. There's been various member input asking, when are you going to do this? You had a resolution in June saying we would have options. Why aren't we seeing options? I want to see options. So there's push on some side for that. There's also the maintenance and wear and tear of things that we can be doing right now in reserves. Again, our roof, our siding, stuff like that, that's ready to be replaced. And there's a seasonality to do that. You know, spring, let's rock and roll on those pieces. But we have to be synced up with our membership to do that. One piece of this is making sure that we're not doing things without getting on the same page with our membership, because there is definitely distrust in the environment here. And I would want to make sure that everyone understands, okay, we're proceeding with roof and siding within one of these three scenarios. So we all know kind of what the end goal is, what the budgetary parameters are. And it's not a sense of, oh, you're going to start doing these things and then change the plan on me. We need to understand the parameters we're working within as a community, so that the membership holds the board accountable, and so the board knows how they can actually operate. So there is some timing in getting us all on board, delaying things until we do that, seasonality of things. So I appreciate the comment about the budget. I do get that for sure. Question in the back first. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Lopes. I lived in Hawaii for 28 years, but we bought in 93 here. My mother and my sister lived their lives out here on Linden. I've been curious because I watched from afar about the $850,000 that we paid to an architect for the new plan, the $10 million plan, and how that all went about and how we're trying to correct the way things happen now. What are we doing about that money that was taken from us?
So it's, the number is around 700,000, a little less. It was not all for the architect. Part of it were for outside contractors, project managers, the site surveying, the geological surveying that was needed as well. It somewhat is what it is. It was executed by past boards in their actions to pursue a certain scenario. And that decision falls on that board. It kind of jumped the gun in the larger capital improvements steps. There's some argument for a project of that scale, saying $10 million, that sure, you could be spending 500, 700 in kind of that initial exploratory phase. But that's really if you have member buy-in as well. Not necessarily a binding vote, but at least directional support for that. So I don't really want to get into all of that today. There's not a lot we can do there, but I do want to emphasize that a project of that scale, it does require a member vote.
Thank you. And then what you did describe as if it's under $350,000, then the board can decide without the member vote?
Correct, yes.
And like you said, on the reserves, only certain assessments, I forget the word you use, that are actual improvements are allowed to be done, not like walls, but like you said, who is deciding before presenting if you want a gymnasium or if you want this? Is the board discuss this privately and come up with the ideas and then reveal it to us?
A lot of this is coming from member input. There's been a lot of surveying, town hall feedback the last few years, probably going on 10 years, of what members are interested in seeing and ideas that have kind of risen to the top in all of these conversations. So one of them being, instead of moving the whole kitchen upstairs, let's put a dumbwaiter in. That's been an idea from the membership for a while. So there's definite community impact that is, or feedback that is impacting all of these decisions. The most recent survey from 2024, one of the questions had a revisit to a prior survey question. So back in 2021, I believe, there was a question of what amenities would you like to see the association add? And one of the highest suggestions was a gym facility. So the 2024 survey revisited those top requests, asking, okay, 3-4 years later, where do we stand on these requests? And the gym was still a high contender. So I would say for the most part, there isn't a lot of kind of individual presenting of ideas that aren't backed by member input or observing use of the facility. Again, one example of that would be the kind of like a multi-purpose, dance fitness floor. If we did that in the pavilion with, say, walling off one of the walls, the windows, and putting it in floor to ceiling mirrors, that's based on the number of dance and fitness classes we have here in the Condor room. So I would be comfortable saying most of these inputs are all gauged on member feedback or seeing the use of the facility. Where I would say an example is one that's coming from kind of inside the house, we'll say, is more of the maintenance and upkeep side of things. If you'll notice, the siding on our building, and particularly the pavilion, does not go all the way down to the ground. It changes material. I think it's exposed concrete in some areas. That has some wear and tear on it that we've had to be taking care of over the years. So one of the internal suggestions is, do we expand the amount of siding that's on our buildings to better take care of our facility? And do we special assess part of that? That wouldn't really be a member recommendation. They're not really following that, but it does come from a place of feedback from within the association. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
of course. Leslie and then Finn. Is that our last?
My name is Leslie, and I wanted to first emphasize that had I had more time, I have much more appropriate questions. But for now, all I have is the knowledge that's in my mind. I have a master's degree in public administration, specifically specializing in finance and budget. I'm on the Finance and Budget Committee, and I'm speaking as a member. We were not informed, again, about this town hall, about this presentation. We were not informed about the post office that was purchased years ago, I guess now. We were not informed about a lot of spending. Like, I think some of the stuff that's discussed in our committee is only brought to us if we, as the members, are demanding it. It just seems unusual. Based on my professional experience, based on my involvement working for the government and being a fraud investigator, my alerts go up, so I look into things first. Now, one, I do not suspect any fraud. I want to make that clear. Absolutely do not. I do think that it's hard when we transition from different boards and different people and trying to keep up with the past. I think our minutes online are not up to date, so it's hard to look things up. It makes it frustrating, but I don't think that's intentional, although I know it can be fixed and it should have been fixed already, but we're still waiting. Now, when I mentioned earlier about the Civic Code Corporation section for California, and that your documentation that was provided to us says that Civil Code 5602B.
5B.
5B. I want to talk about A. A specifically says you first have to have your finances in good order, and we don't. So we're not eligible to have, excuse me, please.
To specify, for financing like a loan, we would not be eligible
No.
to finance a loan.
No, for getting our documents in time, our financial budgeting, to getting our financial numbers finalized and approved and then sent off to the government. All of those are not done on a timely basis, and we're out of compliance. With that in mind, it says that we must make anything other than reserves. Any assessment increase or special assessment must go through the membership vote. And by not including Section A and not showing the real truth, it's omitting and it's misleading. And I'd like to have you guys stop to reflect that Section A is extremely important first.
We can include that in this. We can amend.
You don't, it's not about you can, you should have already.
For the conversation here, and just to clarify, this was not presented or completed in a vacuum. This was discussed with our legal, our reserve specialist, our treasurer, our accounting manager, our GM, and our operations manager. Not right now, no. Guys, guys, ladies, please. The objective here today that I want to keep our eyes on is making sure the membership and the board understands clearly our parameters. That is our objective. I'm willing to absolutely add in A to that, for sure, absolutely. Please, the email is at the end here, the board email, please do. That has been my objective with everyone who has been reviewing this, is to make sure that we have all of these pieces. Leslie, what I want to point out,
Our committee is the specific entity that is supposed to advise the board, and we are not even given information. We don't even know when you're spending over $300,000. This is not okay.
okay, what I would like to point out right now, this current board is not doing any kind of spending in that matter. There is definitely significant baggage that we are all bringing to the table from past years of how things have been done. That's what we're trying to course correct here. It's not going to be perfect overnight. A significant portion of us who are involved in this are volunteers. We don't get paid. We don't get paid for digging into any of this. We don't get paid for juggling it against our own family schedules, all of that. There is a significant portion just in this change process, both in a new GM, a new board, retiring assistant GM. There's a lot that has shifted from the association to the board in terms of responsibility that we were trying to vet and reallocate back to where it should be so that there is proper institutional knowledge, there is proper coordination with everyone. It's not physically possible right now to hit every single mark. I'm human. I'm the liaison to one committee. I have 8 others who are liaisons to the other 8 committees. The intention here is to peel away the layers of maybe black and white operations, misinformed operations, and get us back to a core of best practices operations. And we can't do that unless we know what has been kind of poor actions and what is the proper path to be on. That is this presentation today, and I'm happy to add in 5605A to help clarify that. Let me just make sure we're at the end here. I think, James, is that our last slide? I think that's our last one. Yes, okay. Finn had a question.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Finn Morgan. You're a producer, so am I. I don't know how many jobs I've done, probably over 1,000. I don't remember any job where the client allowed me to just bill them another 20%. Who cares? I know you have the right to do it as an association. And before I say the next thing, I would like to say that I really appreciate this board. Everybody on this board is very good and very responsible, and that includes you, Ms. Bennett. Now, the members do have a voice. Yes, we don't get to vote on the 20%. We have something that's called a recall.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very successful at the last election, as you may remember. I can pretty much guarantee you that if you decide to bill the members another 20%, you're going to have a revolution. People are not going to appreciate it. And the reason is there are people like me that can't afford it. I just don't have the money. I would have to borrow the money to pay what you want. And the other thing that comes into mind is we probably wouldn't mind if the association was run well. And James, you've done a terrific job. You really have. We've had several meetings, and I really appreciate all your efforts. But there are areas that we are grossly wasting money. And we members don't like when you're wasting money that you then come back and say, oh, I need more. It doesn't work.
I'm
Thank
in
you.
complete agreement. And again, the 20% increase of your annual assessment is the operating budget of the association. So let's talk about if by chance the membership did want a larger extensive remodel that's going to require a vote, significant funding, all of that. You would need to and could start setting aside funds to help pay for that. That is still within the 5% cap that the board can operate within. So say, for example, okay, we want to fund $1 million admin building out in the islands, in the island woodchip area. We don't want to finance it, and we're going to take our time and wait till we have the money to do it. Okay, we are going to special assess you, year 1, 2, and 3, the max that the board can special assess, $350,000, to accumulate, what is that, 1.5 something, 1.05, the money for the building. That would be the steps taken to do something like that. The only scenario that a 20% increase to your assessment should be happening is if for some reason the operational cost of the association bloated like that. And now we needed 20% to cover just the operations. So again, even if we wanted to have a larger building, it's still going to need member input. The county parameters itself are going to dictate the scope of that as well. If you're going to be permitting for a new building like that, it encompasses the whole process. Then the county needs to make sure you're not exceeding the 60% of your total value and that your new building can do all the code requirements. Like all of this stuff tips into member approval. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. There cannot be a 20% increase to the annual assessment to fund the clubhouse and pavilion fixes and upgrades. That's not how the operating budget works. It's the 5% per year, up to 350. Each individual piece of that still has to be approved by the board in resolution. And at that point as well, could even say, okay, we have a directional advisory vote from the membership, but the board wants to still put in a gym or something. Well, that meeting where the gym's being proposed, that is the time to say, oh, nope. You're kind of pushing that boundary of staying close to your reserves and being super conservative in your spending here. Leave the gym. We don't want the gym. Each individual item has to be approved itself. Any other questions? Yes, Mark. Oh, there we go. I can see everyone now.
Thank you. My name is Mark Greco. I appreciate what I see here. I think you're trying to get member buy-in for whatever we do. So hopefully there's not a recall or something like that. But what I didn't hear, excuse me, what I didn't hear was what you plan to do to avoid the misspending in the future. So I have some concerns that it wasn't brought to the budget committee. I have, and I've seen, I said this at the last board meeting, little concern that some things weren't brought to other committees. So, can you speak a little bit about if special assessments are given, what kind of changes have been made to assure that the same mistakes aren't repeated?
So again, a big piece of that is really making sure that the board and the membership understand the first two pie wedges of the graphic. So part of what's probably going to happen going forward is that this presentation is now included in the board orientation each year so that new board members coming in understand what best practices are. And I say that from personal experience because even just in my year and a half on the board, I can give two specific examples of where I think we missed the mark and how education, first and foremost, helps correct that missing of the mark. And it's, again, it's not just educating the directors, because then they know the rules and can find ways to abuse the rules. It's educating the members as well so that there is accountability there. We can't operate if the members don't know how things should be working either. So one example, we had a truck last year, reserve item needing to be replaced. I want to say, don't quote me on the model. For the example here, we'll say it was an F-150. For reserves, you are replacing something like for like. That doesn't mean that you're going to buy another 2010 F-150. It means you buy a 2024 F-150. That is a like for like comparison. There's probably going to be some inflation in there in cost. You've hopefully allocated the appropriate amount of money considering inflation in reserves to straightforward replace that vehicle like for like. What was done last year was upgrading the model of that vehicle. So instead of an F-150, it was an F-350. Maybe even been a Dodge model. Anyway, that is not considered a like for like. Now you have a pickup that's a whole crew cab versus, whatever the front seats are. Again, not my expertise in vehicles. If we had wanted, and if we had understood what I've really sunk my teeth into the last 6 months and now clearly understand, if the board had understood that fully at that time, it would have been, okay, we have the reserves for what a F-150 is valued at. And then what are we wanting to exceed that amount in for the F-350? Say it's an extra $10,000 to upgrade that vehicle. That should have been a special assessment of $10,000 if we're doing things properly. So part of this has been, or is being articulated in our policies and our use of reserves in our bylaws, so that there is institutional knowledge to go back to, so we understand this is how this is. And part of it is making sure that, again, our reserves are laid out in a way, and we've accounted for everything in reserves the way that we want to be doing that. So the members are aware of how reserves are laid out, board is aware, and we're all saying, okay, we are running reserves very black and white. There is a little gray area, and another example I can give. So some associations, they will budget in their reserves to remodel their lobby every 20 years. Is that really efficient? Do we really need that up here? We're not trying to keep up with the Joneses. But that is their use of reserves. They allocated that time span and all of the pieces in that, and they want the nicest and the grandest and the shiniest every 20 years. Okay, the membership is aware of that. Board is aware of it. Everyone's on the same page. So a lot of this depends on, again, making sure the membership understands the boundaries, making sure the board understands the boundaries, and making sure the two of them are on the same page and understand what rules and what lane we are operating within. Christy has a question.
You're totally on the right track, but I think the committees help you accomplish that. And if you're not bringing documents to governing docs and you're not bringing these budget items to the Budget and Finance Committee, then you're not taking advantage of the knowledge base in those committees. And yeah, I mean, there's the advice that the board could take from the special committees would really benefit the community.
I agree with that. And thank you again for highlighting that. Because again, I'm not the liaison to all committees. I have one. So it's not always on the forefront of my mind when there's 15 things that we're trying to move forward each month. I'm relying on, the rest of the board to assist with this. So again, I appreciate the reminder, and that is something that I can work on from the top or from the leadership position in leading that for sure. Yes, on the answer. George is bringing you the mic.
I've heard that substantial funds were paid to friends or relatives of people by the prior board. And I don't know if this is true or not. Has this board looked into it? If not, why not? And if it did happen, did we submit a claim to our errors and omissions insurance policy for that? Or consult an attorney about what to do? I understand we paid $100,000 for plans, fine. I understand it's another $800,000 spent, and I don't know what we got for it.
So our treasurer did a review of all spend on the clubhouse, and that was presented in April. Everything ties to an invoice for services or deliverables, plans, site survey, all of that. I just lost my train of thought. Sorry, the mom brain it just drops there for a second. Oh, what I will say, the piece in that again kind of deviated from best practice, not all of it was approved in open session. That's the clutch piece. Every spend, whether it is a reserve item or a capital improvement, that is presented to the board and approved in open session via resolution. There needs to be that resolution paper trail there. And that's the invoice, that's the quote, that's the contract, whatever that is, it needs to be approved in open session, and not all of those pieces were. Can you use the microphone?
Did the association get whatever was paid for, even if it wasn't properly approved?
To my knowledge, yes. There's a couple things that are being looked into because we're not entirely sure on that, but that's very new information. So I don't have anything additional at this time.
Please pursue that and make sure you come to a conclusion before any statute of limitations to go after these people expires.
Absolutely, yes. I think if there are any other questions, we'll end with Leslie.
In response, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Craig?
Red.
Hi. In response to your question, there are civil codes that apply to that. Basically, it's up to the regulations and goes downward to our association. And that's something I really would encourage us incorporating is some kind of a system of accountability that would require consequences. And I know it sounds silly, but membership in good standing is one of those consequences that a member on the board could lose if they were to do something. However, thinking about the past and the statute of limitations, there's only a 3-year limit that we are required to hold our financials. Often organizations hold it longer. There's a 10-year or 7-year for like employment. There's different rules for different categories. However, also for this is that there is something that guides the board and says the board should create a committee of oversight. And each project that has a dollar amount that's over a specified amount, it should be in our bylaws that any amount over that requires a committee, an oversight committee to be formed specifically for that project. And I can provide all the codes. I'm not a robot. I don't have them memorized, but I know that they're there because I have read the entire code book, especially the corporation one.
This is also why, again, we're looking at everything that kind of governs the organization, our business policies and procedures, our bylaws, our rules, all of it, to make sure, one, we're following them, and two, are they still structured kind of in best practice? or are they missing things? And that's part of, again, the kind of just overhaul that this board is attempting to do right now, is to make sure that we're not just assuming, well, we've done something a certain way, we're just going to keep doing it that way. That's not how we want to be approaching any of this. We want to be biting off pieces or encountering pieces of our policies and saying, okay, let's really deep dive into this and make sure we're vetted. It anchors back to Davis Sterling, whatever it may be. We're doing this exact same thing right now on the entire election procedures. So it's a process that we are trying to apply to every single step and every single action that the board takes. That's again where there's a lot that we're trying to achieve, and where I can definitely be better at trying to delegate or encouraging the first level of delegation to delegate further, for sure. One last question in the back, and then Leslie, I'm happy again to sidebar with you after all of this.
Thank you, Candace. I have one question, and it's probably just related to the previous board. But when they bought what I thought was a $200,000 street sweeper instead of like new heavy equipment, like we learned at the CERT meeting yesterday from Joe, that they work tandem, the snow plows and the big rigs, they have to work together. And I wonder why they didn't buy something like that, that's more emergent related. I don't understand why they bought a street sweeper.
Yeah, that's our
come
problem
under that-
child. Again, we'll wrap this up quickly here because it does deviate from the topic, but it is another example, to Mark's point, of you're kind of fudging the lines of how you use your reserves. Yes, our old street sweeper was a reserve item, but at a certain model level. The new one is a significantly larger model, and we purchased it with all reserves. The appropriate best practice would be, okay, take the allocation for the like for like, that's part of it, and then you special assess anything exceeding that. I won't get into why that model, why not something other better serving. That was not in my wheelhouse at the time. But again, I really want us the takeaway today to be that we are on the same page, members and board, on how we can proceed. We do have some options to do that, but there are parameters per each option. And making sure that we can align ourselves in best practice, and making sure that the board is fully educated on how they can operate, and the members are fully educated on how the board should be operating, so that we can be in sync in our decisions and be in alignment with our community. So thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate your time.